Hi, and welcome to the SPI Europe Competent Program Controls course. This is for people at the advanced level. In this one, we're going to look at managing the program plan. My name's Rob Sowden. I was the lead author for MSP and P3M3, as well as being the managing director of Aspire. So I've been with you through all the other modules. I'm looking forward to taking you through this one. Well, first of all, we've got to take everything in context. Now, if we're looking at things through the eyes of a project, we're seeking to live with certainty, aren't we? We're looking to nail down scope, nail down cost, and nail down the time scales. Now, program management is much bigger, much more ambiguous, and hopefully you've come across the term VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's the reality of program planning. The world is changing around us. Programs exist for quite a long time, and everything is changing. The political landscape, the engineering landscape, the technology landscape, things are accelerating. So we need to be ready to deal with these changes. We can't just ignore them like we would maybe from a project perspective. We're coming at it from a program perspective. We need to be agile in the way we deal with things. So, what do we got to think about? Well, ultimately, a program is going to deliver some sort of transformation, whether it's internal to an organization, maybe it's into the marketplace through some digital, or maybe it's a major engineering program. So, we've got to keep the cogs together. We've got to align the strategy up to the business change. We've got to make all these things tick as we go through the program. So, there are three areas that we need to focus on: how well we control our own program and how we keep that aligned to what the portfolio is needing and what the wider organization's business plan requires, how we control the projects within our environment, and of course, how we manage the changes that are going on, because our operations will be changing. So as we can see from my little Giphy there is change going on all the time around us. We've got three dimensions there to manage, and we'll be spinning plates through the life of this program, trying to keep everybody happy. So, what are the main areas that we've got to think about? Well, as a program, we've got to deliver a target operating model of some sort, a blueprint, which has got a range of outcomes in it. So, what do we need to be aware of when we're thinking about that? Firstly, what are the organization's priorities? We need to have some sort of decision matrix for deciding what stops, what goes, what gets authorized, what direction we're going into. We need to have that in place, and we'll deal with that in a little bit later. We need to manage dependencies. Now, dependencies within the program is what we normally think about, and within our projects, which to some extent are within our control. Where things get tricky is when we depend on other programs, other organizations. And once we move seriously outside, when we're thinking about government decisions or whatever it happens to be, political decisions, things get really, really volatile at that point and are outside our control. We've got to control change internally. We've talked already about the problem with programs is that it's minor changes in the projects that are the problem. Really are the major big changes which cause us to go off the rails, so to speak. And it's the aggregation of those changes. We need to have a change control process in place and a hierarchy of reporting. And we need to have our stakeholders involved. Yep, so they understand what's going on and they are engaged with the process of decision making as we move forwards. So just a reminder from the design course, we're looking at three hierarchies of plans or three tiers of plans. So we've got a portfolio plan, which our programs have to line up to. We presumably are going to be one of those program boards that need to stay tight to that portfolio plan, particularly the delivery plan, but we also need to know where they're going with their strategy so that we know we're still aligned up and that the program will still be running in its expected time frame. And then we've got the project boards within our program and making sure that they've got the right authority and their thinking is lined up with ours. So we've got to knit that together as part of our plan. And here's a good example of how our plan could look. This is one that we built for a client a little while ago, where you could see they had a strategic plan, they had some values there that the portfolio was built around, Those were the kind of strategic drivers, and then they dropped into the program, and each of those with the acronyms CST, POD, etc. Those were actually programs, and they were lining up in some way to each of one of those four values. And then below them, we had tranches of projects, and you can see like each of those programs, games, CCO, pods had a range of projects running through tranches, setting themselves up and delivering the changes, and dropping off benefits as they went along. So you can see that actually you can bring this to life in the real world. It's not a theoretical model. And this is the kind of plan that we're looking to achieve. So the four boxes in the diagram, or the kind of circle with the four boxes, is basically our target operating models. Yeah, we had the as-is state on the far left in 2014, and then in 2020 we were looking at what process, organisations, technology and information, the POTI model from a blueprint there, and on the way we've just got one single tranche on the way, or rather two tranches but with one stop point. So you can see how you can bring this together. Now, if you're using this approach, we're thinking about project delivery and capability, we're thinking about achieving outcomes, and we're focused on delivering the benefits, because that's inherently part of our program plan. Our program plan isn't just about coordinating projects and make sure we deliver those business changes and we release the benefits. If that's not in our scope, then you could argue we're not a proper program. Okay, let's have a little think about our reporting process. Now, it should be much more than gathering loads of data every month, creating a lovely dashboard and moving on and starting work on the next month's reporting. We need to really think about how this works. We've got strategic milestones. They are owned by the portfolio plan. They are then delegated down to us in a program, and we build it into our tranche plans to make sure that our outcomes deliver those milestones. That in turn cascades down into the stage plans and into the project milestones. So it should all pull together, and then what we see each month is reports that confirm and validate we're going to get those milestones, that the inter-project dependencies are working as part of the stage plans, that we start to see the inter-program dependencies validated and reported against. We update the portfolio plan and the strategic milestones. So all that detail in the highlight reports is not particularly critical to the reporting process. What we want to know is, are our plans going to land, and what are the issues? All right, so quite a lot of the data you see in highlight reports is not that important. And the concerning thing when we're doing reviews is, why are you gathering data if you're not going to use it? And it costs time, and it costs money, and it costs resources to fill that stuff in. So really having to think about what it is you need to report against to validate both sides of our V diagram. Now, one of the things that we should consider when we're putting a program life cycle together is actually the stages and steps that we go through. Now, MSP talks quite clearly about identifying a program and defining a program, but then it moves into tranches with a whole bunch of activities going on because they happen relatively concurrently. So this is a life cycle that we designed, and it's built into one of the products that you can have access to, which is the P3M framework. And what I had to do for this particular client is they had 6 or 7 completely different programs. So we had to sit back and go, well, okay, what life cycle can we design that's going to work for every one of these programs, even though they were massively different in their nature? And this is what we came up with. Now, obviously it draws on MSP, Vine Division, Blueprint, align existing projects, work out the tranches we're going to build for the future, and then work out how our delivery strategy is going to be. Now, actually, it doesn't matter whether you're restructuring adult social care or building a complete new housing estate, all those things still have to be done. So that's why we built that into the Define program, because it enabled the program managers to actually have major program milestones that they could plan to increase the accuracy and consistency of their plan. And on the first implementation, we discovered most of the program managers hadn't done any of this stuff, and they were just happily launching projects. Then we go into design and we can think about scoping our projects, the governance arrangements for the delivery, and then we start to build our plans together against that hierarchy, and we complete our business case. Now, the interesting one was, how do you manage delivery of tranches in a world when you have no idea what you're actually going to deliver? So we came up with these 4 steps that you need to go through in any program, which is tranche control framework established. So how are we going to run this? And that was drawing on some lessons from the Olympics, where as you move through tranches, you need a different control framework. If you have done a huge construction and now you're moving into fit out or some technical phase, you don't need construction people in the governance framework. And we saw that the Olympics, this happened, and of course we've seen it at Crossrail as well in the UK, where they did very well on the tunnelling, and the next tranche went wrong because they were kind of overconfident, but also that they didn't have the right control framework in for what became a much more engineering technology program. And then as we go through this, what are we going to see? We're going to see major capabilities delivered. It doesn't matter whether you're dealing with child welfare or you're delivering Crossrail, you will build major capabilities. Some are easier to define, but you will have to build them. And then you will have to transition to get your outcomes. And you will have to get rid of the old ways of working. So those 4 steps were able to survive pretty much any program. So if you've not got a life cycle, maybe you could consider using that one. Now, as you move through your life cycle, one of the things that's going to happen is the level of uncertainty decreases, which means you can change the way your governance works. So when you're in define the program, there'll be lots of risks and unknowns. When you're into delivering tranches, then those risks of the unknown should have reduced, but we may have more issues because we will understand that things don't work. So we can expect the nature of the governance to change. People in the early days will need to be very good with ambiguity. People in the delivering the tranche stage need to be much tighter on discipline and controlling projects to make sure they deliver their requirements and pass quality criteria. Just a little thing on mixing project methodologies. If you're in a program environment, we've seen lots of people run into trouble with this. So if you're not familiar with the term waterfall, that's basically stage gates. We've got agile, which is basically sprints. And of course, you might have some outsourced suppliers who have their own methodologies that are delivering. So as a program manager or program director setting this lot up, you need to be able to cope with this. And so therefore you need to set some really robust controls in place, because whatever they may say, agile does have to be controlled and it can't be chaotic. Now they might be working on 2-week sprints, whereas a waterfall project may be working on a 3-month stage, but each one of them should achieve something each month. So you should be tracking that. There's no reason why you can't have management milestones in a program for agile, waterfall, and of course outsourced. So your supplier may use their own methodology, but you still want to prove they're doing stuff. So you need to be able to prove with evidence things are happening. So when you're putting this together, things you should consider for reporting against the plan is that you've got consistent governance. So agile can have a project board, just like a waterfall or outsourced project delivery. You need consistent vocabulary. You don't want to get wrapped up in all the lingo that comes with different methods. So you set the rules, make sure that you've got some controls at points in place in a life cycle, and you need to integrate them to produce the outcomes. Okay, and you need to understand how it interfaces. You know, an agile project may be waiting for something from a waterfall project. So if you're in IT, in simple terms, they might be doing software development, but the hardware for the software to live on may be coming from a different type of project. So you need to cut through all that stuff to make sure you understand what's going on. So tricky thing is prioritization during the life cycle. So how do you make decisions? And we can't give you any answers to that just at this point. However, what we would say is you need to set up a decision matrix that has weighting in it, considers things like each initiative, how much weighting are you going to put on the fact that it's aligned to a strategic objective? How much weighting does it get when it's aligned to an outcome or a change in the operating model? Equally, with benefits, do you give it a greater weighting if it produces more benefits? I remember one client during some times of cuts, if a project could deliver benefits within 12 months, then it received the maximum rating and it got its budget. All right, so when we're waiting, do we mind changing the requirements? Knock-on effect. Do we mind the changing of scope? How are we going to weight that? How do we weight timescales? And how do we weight stakeholder support? So it's all about having a decision matrix with weighting against the things that are important to you. And those 8 things that I've just flagged up are common areas that you might want to consider. Okay, let's have a little look at the thorny issue of dependency management. Now, when we're reviewing and working with programs, it's not uncommon when we ask to look at the plan to be shown a hugely complicated Gantt chart, whether it's come out of Microsoft Project or something like P6, showing this labyrinth of dependencies. Now, the problem has been is that those dependencies have been designed around a work breakdown structure when they work much better from a product breakdown structure. So in this diagram, we're showing how all the activities in the bottom triangles, which are our projects, are tied together to the triangles in the top, which are the headings from our blueprint or our target operating model. So every project should be contributing some way to our process change, our information systems change, a technology change, or our organizational structure change. So we can largely tie whole projects to certain elements. But the truth of the matter is, within each of those projects, there will be requirements that are being added to it, and they will be creating products or outputs or deliverables. And projects don't depend as a whole on each other. They depend on an output from each of those projects. Now, if you track it by task, it's very difficult to identify because the task itself may not have a common naming convention. So in this one, we can see that the red blobs are basically inputs, or where we're dependent on somebody else, and the green boxes are outputs, where we're actually creating something. So you can see that the green boxes are contributing up to an element of the potty, or those green boxes are providing something to another project. And if that green box is tied to a red box, which is an input, then everything's safe. What you would be looking for across this is where are projects expecting an input, which is a red box, from somebody or other, and it's not owned. Equally, if there's a green box, which is the project output, if that's being created, but it's not contributing to the blueprint and it's not contributing to another project, then one has to ask, why is it being created? So that's how we can look at dependencies in a different way. And then if we look across a scenario where there's multiple projects and programs running, we may well find that a program has a dependency on a project in another program. And now you're really getting into a brain scramble trying to sort this out. Now, the value of the blueprint in this situation is that the programs, as long as they've all got one, have got a vocabulary to discuss how the dependencies can work. So, for example, if we look at this diagram, you can see that two of the projects are working on a process, the one on the right-hand side and the one in the middle. So it could be in that scenario, not just that you know that they're working on it, but you give the other program the job of sorting that element of the process out for you. So there's ways of therefore managing assumptions, managing risks, and making sure that they're being owned across the portfolio. So it's really powerful in that way. But most of the problems are because dependencies are identified as tasks in work breakdown structures, rather than being identified as inputs and outputs, which is the way program management and certainly MSP has always advised it. So a little example where things can go wrong. Back in the UK in about 2019, there were some major upgrades to railway timetables. And what had happened was a series of projects and programs had been run across the north of England, all of them targeting improvements to timetables, numbers of trains running, that kind of stuff. Now, each one of those projects was signed off, each program was signed off, but when it actually came to go live, it didn't work together. And the reason it didn't work together, as the new trains, the new timetable, the electrification and things came in, was that nobody had really tested the whole system. Plus, each one of the sign-offs did have slightly lower quality criteria than was needed. And the aggregation of those little things caused huge problems and commuter problems for months and even up to years in some cases. So really focuses in on the need to have the whole plan, and that ultimately is the business translation that's key to your success. Okay, well, time for you to have a cup of coffee. I hope you found that useful and some new ideas. And a lot more detail obviously is in the module. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next video.